There comes a moment in a man's life when he realizes that ordinary strength is not enough. Not in this world, not anymore. Strength breaks. Strength is challenged. Strength is tested by every weak person who believes he can steal a piece of it. What you need in 2026 is something far beyond strength. A state of being that lies outside the reach of ordinary men. Untouchability. Most people will enter the new year exactly how they ended the last one. Circling the same frustrations, repeating the same weaknesses, obeying the same impulses, drowning in the same noise. They will speak of change, but they will remain the same. They will promise improvement, but they will chase comfort. They will shout about their goals, but they will collapse at the first sign of pressure. But you are not here to repeat the year. You are here to end every version of yourself that failed. 2026 is not a calendar transition for you. It is a psychological rupture, a clean break from the man the world could still reach, influence, weaken, manipulate, or destroy. This year, you rise beyond the noise that once devoured your focus. This year, you silence the impulses that once commanded your emotions. This year, you build a presence that disturbs the insecure and inspires the disciplined. 2026, the year you become untouchable. Welcome to the transformation that will define the rest of your life. Rule number 1, the severance of noise. The first transformation required to become untouchable begins with something deceptively simple, the removal of noise. Not the external noise of traffic, notifications, or conversations, but the deeper noise that fractures a man's concentration from within. Most men spend their entire existence trying to outrun noise rather than dominate it. They distract themselves from their pain, run from their thoughts, drown their anxiety in entertainment, numb their frustration with routine, and escape their emptiness with imitation. Noise becomes their shelter and their prison. It prevents self-awareness, but it also prevents self-mastery. To become untouchable, you must do something society finds unnatural. You must confront the internal noise until it dies. This is not a poetic metaphor. It is a psychological requirement. Men who cannot sit with themselves cannot command themselves. And men who cannot command themselves can never control the trajectory of their lives. True silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of self-conflict. It is the state where every internal voice that once dragged you backward has been eradicated by deliberate introspection. It is the stillness that remains when you no longer resist reality, no longer negotiate with your weaknesses, no longer justify your failures, and no longer fear your thoughts. In 2026, you will destroy the noise by doing what you once avoided, listening to it, watching it, observing it until it loses its power. Because the brain behaves like a beast. The more you chase it, the more it runs. The more you observe it, the more it becomes tame. The untouchable man is feared not because he is loud, but because he is internally unmoved. Nothing inside him is chaotic. Nothing inside him is unfinished. Nothing inside him is louder than his purpose. Most men try to control the world. The untouchable man controls himself, and the world obeys by default. Rule number 2, the weight of presence. There is a moment when a man enters a room and something shifts in the air before he even speaks. People straighten their posture. Conversations pause for half a second. Eyes track him without understanding why. It is not confidence. It is not beauty. It is not physical strength. It is presence. And in 2026, you will cultivate a presence so controlled and so grounded that people feel it before they see you. Presence is created not by what you show, but by everything you withhold. Most men broadcast their insecurity. They overshare, overreact, overexplain. They move too fast, talk too much, laugh too loudly, apologize unnecessarily, and reveal their emotional landscape to anyone who pays attention. They cling to validation like a drowning man clings to driftwood. Every gesture screams desperation. The untouchable man, however, does not project energy outward. He pulls the world inward. He moves with intentional slowness. He speaks only when the words serve his purpose. He lets silence hang between sentences long enough for others to feel the weight of his mind. He listens with the stillness of a predator, not the eagerness of prey. Presence is not about intimidation. It's about being unmistakably unaffected. Your presence becomes powerful when you no longer rush, you no longer flinch, you no longer react to disrespect immediately. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer crave acknowledgement. Because nothing weakens a man faster than the need to be seen. The moment you try to be impressive, you fail. The moment you try to be dominant, you expose your lack of dominance. The moment you try to appear confident, you reveal your insecurity. Presence is built from the inside out, from the quiet certainty that you are enough. Not because the world approves, but because you no longer seek its approval. In 2026, your presence becomes a silent weapon. You will enter a conversation and immediately sense the psychological vulnerabilities of the others. Not because you studied body language like a technician, but because your stillness will amplify their restlessness. Their anxiety reveals itself in contrast to your calm. The untouchable man creates a mirror in others. Your silence exposes their noise. Your control exposes their impulsiveness. Your composure exposes their instability. Presence is also physical. It comes from posture, not forced but natural. A straight spine, relaxed shoulders, grounded feet, movements that are economic, not frantic. People trust a man whose body is not at war with himself. They fear a man whose body radiates restraint. In 2026, your goal is simple. Become the person people notice before they understand why. Not through flash, not through volume, but through the gravity of a man who does not seek anything from the room he enters. Because the moment you want nothing, not approval, not attention, not validation, you gain everything. Rule number 3, the discipline of emotional coldness. If there is one trait that separates the untouchable man from the ordinary, it is the ability to remain emotionally cold in moments where others collapse under pressure. Emotional coldness is not cruelty, nor apathy, nor a lack of humanity. It is mastery. The ability to feel without being controlled, to think without being disturbed, and to act without being derailed by internal storms. Most men believe they are rational until their emotions activate. Anger steals their clarity. Lust steals their discipline. Fear steals their ambition. Jealousy steals their self-worth. Attachment steals their dignity. In 2026, you must become the man who feels emotions like passing weather. Real but irrelevant. They move through you, but they do not determine the path you take. They may shake the trees, but they do not alter the mountain. Emotional coldness begins with space, the space between stimulus and reaction, the distance between what happens and what you allow yourself to do in response. Weak men have no space. Everything triggers them. They lash out, they spiral, they implode. Their emotions become their masters. The untouchable man, however, has a lag, a sacred pause between emotion and expression. Someone insults him. He notices it, but he does not move. Someone provokes him. He sees the bait, but he does not bite. Someone challenges him. He observes the insecurity behind the attack, and his anger dissolves before it has time to form. Coldness is clarity. When you are cold, you are slower to speak, slower to react, slower to show your hand. Your anger becomes strategic instead of chaotic. Your disappointment becomes instruction instead of self-pity. Your pain becomes information instead of identity. The world worships passionate men because they are predictable, easily controlled, easily manipulated, easily pushed. But the man who cannot be emotionally provoked becomes a psychological anomaly. Others do not know how to engage with him. They do not know where they stand with him. They do not know what affects him, or if anything affects him at all. That uncertainty is power. Emotional coldness also protects your energy. When you no longer attach yourself to outcomes, people, drama, or validation, you become a fortress. Not a fragile ego that needs constant repair, but a silent structure that stands regardless of the weather around it. To become untouchable, you must eliminate 3 emotional habits. Immediate reactions. Nothing is worth reacting to instantly. Personalization. Not everything is about you. Most things aren't. Emotional bargaining. If they do this, I'll feel good. If they don't, I'll feel bad. Never let others choose your emotional state. By mid-2026, if you stay disciplined, people will start saying the same things about you. You've changed. You're distant. You're harder to read. You don't get upset like before. Good. Distance is power. Stability is power. Emotional coldness is power. Because the man who cannot be manipulated emotionally cannot be manipulated at all. Rule number 4, the elimination of weak desires. A man becomes untouchable when his desires stop sabotaging him, not when he acquires more goals, Not when he becomes more ambitious, but when he destroys the cravings that weaken his focus, drain his willpower, and scatter his life into 1,000 meaningless impulses. Weak desires are the invisible chains that hold most men down. They don't feel heavy, but they control everything. They waste time, dilute potential, fragment identity. A man with weak desires cannot rise. He is pulled down by cravings he mistakes for pleasure, comfort he mistakes for happiness, impulses he mistakes for freedom. In 2026, your transformation requires a brutal audit. Which desires make you stronger, and which ones make you small? Weak desires always share the same characteristics. They are easy to satisfy. They feel good immediately. They leave you emptier than before. They cost far more than they give. Desires like the need for constant entertainment, the urge for validation from strangers, compulsive scrolling for dopamine hits, addictions to sexual stimulation without intimacy or purpose, the craving for short-term pleasure instead of long-term identity, the desire to be liked rather than respected, the chase for comfort at the expense of greatness. Weak desires promise relief but deliver erosion, erosion of discipline, erosion of clarity, erosion of self-respect. The untouchable man eliminates these desires not with repression, but with replacement. He replaces shallow cravings with desires that build him: mastery, skill, excellence, power, direction, self-governance. Weak desires give you a moment of pleasure. Powerful desires give you a lifetime of structure. The elimination of weak desires is not about removing joy. It's about removing self-sabotage. It's about building a core that no cheap pleasure can penetrate. When you stop needing distractions to feel alive, you become dangerous. When you stop needing approval to feel worthy, you become free. When you stop needing instant gratification to feel comfort, you become unstoppable. Most men cannot progress because they try to upgrade their habits without killing the desires that cause their regression. They try to build discipline on top of addiction. They try to build character on top of impulse. They try to build a new life while dragging the cravings of their old self like corpses behind them. You cannot ascend with weight strapped to your mind. In 2026, you will eliminate weak desires through abstinence, redirection, and purpose. You will create an environment where your old cravings cannot survive. You will build routines that starve your weaknesses and feed your evolution. You will become a man whose appetite shapes his destiny rather than destroys it. By the time the year matures, people will notice your transformation not by what you do, but by what you no longer want. Because the untouchable man is not the one who gets everything he desires. He is the one who no longer desires the things that make him weak. Rule number 5, the reconstruction of identity. To become untouchable, you must rebuild the most fundamental structure of your existence, your identity. Not your goals, not your habits, not your mindset, your identity. Because everything you do flows from who you believe you are. And most men, without realizing it, are living inside identities formed by accident, inherited from childhood, shaped by insecurity, or built through years of drifting. In 2026, you cannot ascend with an identity constructed by your weakest years. Identity is not a personality trait. It is a psychological architecture. It shapes your choices, your behavior, your discipline, your self-respect. When a man's identity is weak, he collapses under pressure. Because he is still unconsciously loyal to a version of himself that was fragile, distracted, addicted, unfocused, or afraid. To reconstruct your identity, you must first destroy the old one, not revise it, not improve it, not decorate it, destroy it. You must detach from every internal label that no longer serves you. The lazy identity, the unlucky identity, the emotional identity, the overthinker identity, the undisciplined identity, the broken identity. None of these are real. They are stories repeated so many times, the brain began to obey them. Identity is not discovered, it is engineered. A man becomes untouchable when he decides exactly who he is and forces the world to adjust. He becomes the architect rather than the result, the sculptor rather than the clay. He rises above the identities given to him by society, by family, by failure, by trauma, by environment. The new identity is built through consistency, not instant changes, not motivational promises, not emotional highs. Consistency is the cement of identity. If you behave like the man you want to become, every day, for 3 months, your brain will stop recognizing the old version of you. Neurons rewire, values shift, self-respect recalibrates. Your instincts transform, your standards rise automatically. Identity is not about how you act when motivated. It is about how you act when drained, when bored, when tempted, when unseen. A man's identity is revealed not by his goals, but by what he tolerates. In 2026, your reconstruction requires a brutal redefinition of tolerance. What you once tolerated, you will now reject. What you once accepted, you will now outgrow. What you once excused, you will now eliminate. Identity solidifies through refusal. Refusal to regress, refusal to break your word, refusal to betray your standards, refusal to return to your weakest patterns. When you rebuild your identity, people will say you changed. They will say you're distant. They will say you're colder, sharper, more selective, more focused. Good. Identity does not need permission to evolve. By the time 2026 ends, the old versions of you should feel like strangers. Men you once were, men you outgrew, men who died the moment you stopped serving them. Because the untouchable man is not just stronger, he is unrecognizable compared to who he used to be. Rule number 6, the mastery of long-term vision. A man becomes untouchable the moment he stops living for the immediate moment and starts operating from a long-term vantage point. Vision is not a dream, it's a form of power. It allows you to see beyond impulses, beyond circumstances, beyond setbacks, beyond disappointments. It allows you to act from the perspective of the man you are becoming, not the man you currently are. Most men cannot hold a long-term vision because they are prisoners of the present. They react to every emotion, every distraction, every inconvenience. They think in hours, not months. They plan in days, not years. Their actions are tied to how they feel right now, instead of who they want to be in a decade. This is why they stagnate. This is why they repeat themselves. This is why the world can reach them, influence them, weaken them. In 2026, you must escape the gravitational pull of the present moment. Long-term vision is built on 2 pillars, direction and detachment. Direction gives you a compass. Detachment keeps you steady when the path becomes unclear. A man with long-term vision does not collapse when progress feels slow. He does not quit when the results are invisible. He does not question his path because someone doubts him or mocks him. He does not need instant reward. He does not demand immediate transformation. He understands the truth. Every powerful outcome requires a period of invisible work. Long-term vision is psychological discipline, not motivation. It is choosing strategy over impulse, systems over emotions, structure over desire. It is refusing to let the ups and downs of the moment determine the architecture of your future. Your long-term vision must become so clear that temporary suffering does not intimidate you, so powerful that distraction feels like a threat to your destiny, so meaningful that comfort feels like betrayal. The untouchable man sees what others cannot. While others chase weekend pleasures, he is building a decade of dominance. While others look for shortcuts, he is constructing foundations. While others fear risk, he fears stagnation. While others ask, "Is this enough?" he asks, "Does this align with who I am becoming?" Vision is not having goals, it is having a North Star that organizes your entire life. Your habits, your environment, your relationships, your routines, your standards, all of them must orbit the vision like planets around a sun. Anything that does not serve the vision must be eliminated. Anything that slows the vision must be distanced. Anything that distracts from the vision must be ignored. Your vision must become your identity. Your lifestyle must become your proof. Your discipline must become your language. Your silence must become your engine. And when people question your choices, your path, your distance, your coldness, your ambition, your standards, your focus, your solitude, they are not questioning you. They are questioning the magnitude of your vision. Let them. Because the man with long-term vision walks alone at first, then ahead of everyone. In 2026, your long-term vision will separate you from the masses. They will live in cycles, you will live in trajectory. They will chase feelings, you will chase eternity. They will repeat themselves, you will evolve beyond recognition. Long-term vision makes you untouchable because the man who thinks in decades cannot be defeated by a bad week, a bad month, or even a bad year. He is already living in a future others cannot even imagine. Rule number 7. The art of selective isolation. Guion narrado, ritmo lento y reflexivo. Isolation is one of the most misunderstood forces in a man's life. Weak men fear it. Average men misinterpret it. But the untouchable man uses it as a weapon, a forge where identity is reforged, a sanctuary where noise loses its influence, a battlefield where he conquers the deepest parts of himself. Selective isolation is not loneliness. It is not exile. It is not emotional withdrawal for the sake of drama or ego. Selective isolation is strategic distance. It is the recognition that not every person, not every conversation, not every interaction, and not every environment deserves access to you. Most men suffocate under the weight of constant connection. They are always reachable, always distracted, always consuming, always reacting. Their minds never rest. Their instincts never sharpen. Their purpose never becomes clear. They have no internal world, only external stimulation. In 2026, you must reclaim your internal world. Selective isolation means choosing when to disappear, and more importantly, why. It is the deliberate removal of yourself from environments that weaken you. It is walking away from people who drain you. It is cutting off the noise that distorts your clarity. It is giving yourself the space and silence required to transform. Isolation becomes powerful when it is purposeful, not escapism, not avoidance, purpose. When you isolate yourself with intention, 3 things happen. First, your mind becomes sharper. When you stop consuming society's constant stream of opinions, judgment, emotional influence, your thoughts become your own. You begin to hear yourself. You begin to understand yourself. You begin to confront truths that noise once drowned. Second, your discipline strengthens. Distance from distraction is the foundation of discipline. A man surrounded by temptations cannot build self-control. But a man who learns to enjoy his own company, who can sit in silence without drowning in it, becomes psychologically untouchable. He is no longer dependent on stimulation. He becomes self-generating. Third, your presence grows heavier. Paradoxically, the man who isolates himself becomes more powerful in social situations. Why? Because he is not desperate. He is not drained. He is not seeking attention. He does not need validation. His energy is preserved, distilled, purified. This creates an aura others can feel immediately. The aura of a man who does not crave the room because he does not need the room. Selective isolation also sharpens your social intelligence. When you step away from people, you return with a clearer understanding of who deserves a place in your life. You begin to see the difference between allies and parasites, between those who elevate you and those who drain you, between connections that strengthen your path and connections that sabotage it. Because the truth is simple, you cannot become untouchable while surrounded by people who keep touching your energy. In 2026, you will learn to retreat when necessary. Not because you fear the world, but because you are building something the world cannot yet comprehend. Not because you dislike people, but because your evolution requires environments free of interference. Not because you are antisocial, but because you are becoming selective, and selectivity is a form of power. By the time the year ends, your isolation will make people curious. Your distance will make them question themselves. Your silence will make them feel your absence more intensely than your presence ever did. Because the man who chooses isolation is dangerous, but the man who uses isolation strategically becomes untouchable. Rule number 8, the rise of the controlled masculine force. Every man carries a raw force within him, a primal, instinctive, untamed energy that holds the potential for greatness or destruction. It is the masculine force, the fire that can build civilizations or burn them to the ground. Most men either suppress it or misuse it. They fear it, misunderstand it, or let it consume them. But the untouchable man does something rare. He controls it. Controlled masculine force is not aggression. It is not emotional chaos. It is not domination through volume, intimidation, or ego. It is the ability to command the warrior within you without letting him run wild. It is strength without insecurity, power without impulsiveness, dominance without desperation. In 2026, your evolution requires mastering this inner force, not killing it and not letting it rule you. Weak men either collapse into softness or explode into uncontrolled intensity. The soft man avoids conflict. He avoids responsibility. He avoids challenge. He avoids discomfort. He avoids anything that threatens his fragile stability. He calls it peace, but it's fear disguised as virtue. The uncontrolled man, on the other hand, is all fire, no direction. He reacts emotionally. He destroys relationships. He burns opportunities. He confuses chaos with strength. He calls it passion, but it's insecurity disguised as power. The untouchable man walks the third path, the path of controlled intensity, a calm storm, a silent blade, a presence that is grounded yet undeniably dangerous. A man who does not need to prove his power because his restraint proves it for him. Controlled masculine force shows itself in your posture, your tone, your decisions, your patience. It reveals itself in your ability to endure discomfort without flinching, to channel anger into discipline, to transform aggression into drive, and to hold your boundaries without theatrical displays. You do not need to shout. Your stillness does the talking. You do not need to threaten. Your absence is threat enough. You do not need to force respect. Your discipline earns it silently. The controlled masculine force also manifests physically, not in exaggerated muscle or hyper-masculine aesthetics, but in strength rooted in functionality. The strength to lift, to endure, to move with stability, to rely on your own body. Physical capability reinforces psychological confidence. It is a reminder that you are not merely a mind navigating the world, but a force within it. In 2026, you will cultivate both the physical and psychological aspects of masculinity. Not for vanity, not for ego, not for validation, but because a man disconnected from his strength becomes vulnerable to the world's harshest pressures. Your discipline becomes your armor. Your patience becomes your grip. Your ability to stay calm under fire becomes your weapon. The world respects a man who is dangerous but chooses not to act on that danger unnecessarily. A man with claws he rarely shows. A man with a fire that burns quietly behind his eyes. A man whose silence carries more weight than another man's rage. Controlled masculine force is what makes a man untouchable because it makes him unpredictable, unreadable, and unshakable. Others cannot intimidate him, manipulate him, or break him because his strength is not loud. It is anchored. By the end of 2026, this controlled force will radiate through your presence. People will sense it in the way you speak, the way you move, the way you react to nothing. They will feel the silent pressure of a man who has mastered the animal within without killing it. Because the untouchable man is not the one who is harmless. He is the one who is powerful, intentional, and in complete control. Rule number 9, immunity to external validation. No man becomes untouchable until he separates his identity from the opinions of others. Validation is the leash that controls the modern mind. It dictates behavior, shapes desires, and quietly enslaves those who depend on it. The world is full of men who live as reflections, not realities, shaped by expectations, by approval, by the fear of rejection. 2026 is the year you break that chain. External validation is subtle. It hides behind compliments, likes, attention, affection, and praise. It disguises itself as motivation. It convinces you that you need to be seen, acknowledged, and approved to feel worthy. But this is the exact source of your vulnerability. When others can grant you worth, they can also take it away. A man who needs validation becomes predictable. He becomes manipulable. He becomes emotionally fragile. He becomes a slave to impressions. He lives in fear of disappointing strangers. He performs rather than exists. But the untouchable man? He operates from internal truth, not external approval. His decisions are rooted in personal standards, not applause. His identity is grounded in conviction, not compliments. His direction is shaped by purpose, not permission. This independence is not arrogance. It is sovereignty. To become immune to validation is to stop letting your self-worth fluctuate with the tides of external reactions. It is choosing to walk your path without needing it to be admired. It is developing a spine made of conviction instead of desire. It is refusing to negotiate your identity for the comfort of others. This immunity begins when you recognize how often your actions are shaped by invisible observers, the imaginary audience that follows men everywhere. You dress for them, you talk for them, you post for them, you succeed for them, and in doing so, you abandon the self for the sake of perception. The untouchable man dissolves this audience. He acts because action aligns with his standards. He speaks because his words carry intention. He chooses because the choice is right, not because it is popular. He walks alone even in a crowd. This detachment grants a rare freedom. You stop fearing criticism because you no longer chase praise. These two forces are twins. You cannot desire one without fearing the other. When you reject the need for validation, both lose their power over you. And here is the paradox. The moment you stop seeking validation, you begin to attract genuine respect. People are drawn to the man who stands firm in himself, the man who does not flinch under judgment, the man who does not bend to win approval, the man who does not perform for acceptance, the man who is complete with or without witnesses. In 2026, you will cultivate this inner immunity by facing the discomfort of standing alone. It will test you. It will expose your dependence on approval. It will force you to confront the parts of yourself that still seek recognition. But once you pass through it, you emerge with a psychological armor that cannot be pierced. Because the man who does not need validation becomes the man no one can control. That, more than anything, makes you untouchable. Rule number 10. The relentless self-reinvention. Most men live one life, one identity, one version of themselves, and they cling to it until the end. They treat the self like a fixed object, a permanent structure that must be protected rather than rebuilt. This is why they remain stagnant. This is why they never evolve. This is why every year feels like the last. But the untouchable man operates differently. He destroys who he was in order to build who he must become. 2026 is not just another year. It is a forge, a crucible, a place where the version of you that entered will not be the one that leaves. Reinvention is not cosmetic. It is not about aesthetics, trends, or superficial improvements. It is the radical reshaping of your internal world, your beliefs, your habits, your identity, your standards. To reinvent yourself is to refuse to remain loyal to a version of you that no longer aligns with your future. The world pressures you to stay consistent, to remain recognizable, to avoid change because others fear it. People become uncomfortable when you evolve beyond the role they assigned you. They try to anchor you to the past you because the new you forces them to confront their own stagnation. But you do not evolve for them. You evolve despite them. Self-reinvention begins with a recognition. The man you are today is not enough to carry you into the life you want. If your dream requires a stronger, wiser, colder, more disciplined version of yourself, then the current you must be sacrificed. And yes, sacrifice is the correct word. You must sacrifice comfort. You must sacrifice identity. You must sacrifice habits built from weakness. You must sacrifice the stories you tell yourself to avoid change. You must sacrifice the ego that resists becoming a beginner again. Reinvention is destruction followed by precision. You must dismantle outdated beliefs, break behavioral loops, eliminate dependencies, and kill traits that sabotage your potential. And then, with discipline and clarity, you construct the new architecture of your identity. This process is not linear. Some days you will feel reborn. Other days you will feel like ruins. But ruins are necessary, because the old structure must fall before the new one can rise. The men who fear reinvention cling to familiarity, even when it destroys them. They lie to themselves, saying, "This is just who I am," as if identity is a prison. Meanwhile, the untouchable man studies himself like a blacksmith examines metal, understanding where the cracks are, where the weaknesses form, where the structure fails, and then he reforges. In 2026, you will replace the outdated version of yourself with one built from clarity and force. Not wishful thinking, not temporary motivation, not half-hearted improvement, but a fundamental rewiring. Your mind will shift, your habits will shift, your identity will shift, your energy will shift, and because of that, your entire life trajectory will shift. Reinvention is not an act, it is a declaration. I refuse to stay as I am. And understand this truth. Every level of your life will require a new version of you. Success will demand it, discipline will demand it, power will demand it, purpose will demand it. The man who refuses to grow becomes obsolete. The man who reinvents himself becomes unstoppable. This relentless evolution, this refusal to remain stagnant, is what makes you unpredictable, uncontainable, and ultimately untouchable. Rule 11, emotional austerity. Most men drown in their own emotional noise. They feel too much, react too quickly, speak too soon, and collapse under impulses they never learned to command. They move through life like open wounds, bleeding energy, attention, dignity. In every interaction, this is why they can be manipulated. This is why they are predictable. This is why they crumble when pressure arrives. But the untouchable man practices emotional austerity. The discipline of withholding, conserving, controlling what others waste. Emotional austerity does not mean becoming hollow or numb. It means owning your emotional output with precision. Like spending a currency, every emotion spent cheaply weakens you. Every emotion withheld strategically strengthens you. In a world where everyone reacts instantly, the man who reacts rarely becomes powerful. He is the one others cannot read. He is the one others cannot provoke. He is the one others cannot shake. And in 2026, this will be one of your greatest advantages: the ability to remain centered while everyone else collapses inward. Emotional austerity begins with restraint, choosing silence when others argue, choosing calm when others panic, choosing stillness when others chase chaos. You stop explaining your feelings to people who haven't earned access to them. You stop reacting to disrespect with visible anger. You stop revealing your internal state through facial expressions, tone, or impulsive decisions. People fear what they cannot decipher. They fear the mind that does not crack under pressure. They fear the man who does not bleed emotion on command. When someone cannot read you, they cannot control you. This is why emotional austerity is a weapon. It prevents people from sinking hooks into your triggers. It deprives manipulators of leverage. It shields you from attacks meant to provoke reactions that weaken your position. The man who reveals nothing owns everything. But this discipline also turns inward. You stop indulging emotional narratives that sabotage you. You stop feeding thoughts that lead to anxiety, jealousy, insecurity, fear. You stop allowing your emotions to dictate your identity. Instead, you observe them with cold clarity. A feeling is just a spark. It becomes destructive only if you pour fuel on it. This is how emotional austerity transforms you. You start living based on principles, not impulses. Action replaces reaction. Strategy replaces emotion. Composure replaces chaos. And because of this, others begin to sense something different in you. A steadiness, a groundedness, a quiet self-command that cannot be faked. People may misinterpret it as coldness. Let them. Coldness is misread only by those who burn themselves out emotionally. The truth is that emotional austerity makes you more powerful precisely because it reduces friction. You waste less energy. You stop fighting unnecessary battles. You stop investing emotional currency where it brings no return. You become efficient, focused, dangerously calm, and eventually untouchable. Because when the world cannot shake you, it must respect you. When chaos cannot provoke you, it must bend around you. And when your emotions serve you, instead of sabotage you, you step into a level of power most men never reach. 2026 is the year you master this discipline, because without emotional austerity, no other rule can be held for long. Rule number 12, the discipline of one path. If emotional austerity makes you internally unshakable, then the discipline of one path makes you externally unstoppable. Most men scatter themselves across too many roads. They chase 5 purposes, 6 goals, 8 identities, never mastering any, never committing fully, never becoming dangerous in any direction. They wake each morning with diluted intent, fragile ambition, and a fractured sense of self. A man without a singular path is a man without force. Power requires concentration, not diffusion. Progress requires continuity, not constant reinvention. Transformation requires focus, not fragmentation. In 2026, you must choose one path and walk it with a kind of ruthless devotion that most men are too weak to maintain. This rule is not about restricting your potential. It is about refusing the distractions that cripple it. Modern life is engineered to break your focus. Infinite entertainment, instant gratification, shallow goals, dopamine traps. Every path except the right one feels easier at first. That's how men lose decades without noticing. But the untouchable man directs his entire force, time, energy, discipline, identity into one chosen direction. Not 10, not 5, 1. This is how mountains move. When you commit to one path fully, 3 transformations occur. First, you become immune to distraction. When your direction is singular, every stimulus is evaluated through one question. Does this serve the path? If the answer is no, you cut it without hesitation. This eliminates 90% of the world's distractions instantly. Your mind stops wandering. Your time stops leaking. Your willpower stops thinning. You live with a simplicity that most men envy, but will never achieve. Second, you create terrifying momentum. Scattered effort produces nothing. Concentrated effort produces inevitability. When all of your days, habits, and decisions serve one path, you accelerate in ways that feel supernatural to others. They will call you lucky, talented, gifted, never understanding that it was simply focus. The world underestimates the man who is consistent. Even more, it fears the man who is consistent in one direction. That kind of man becomes unstoppable, predictable, not in behavior, but in outcome. Third, you become defined by purpose, not circumstance. Most men live reactively. They adapt their direction to whatever life throws at them. Your path becomes something deeper. A spine? A man with one path stands straighter, speaks clearer, moves with intention. His identity solidifies, his priorities sharpen. He becomes someone whose actions align so closely with his purpose that others feel it before he speaks. This is presence. This is weight. This is power. And when circumstances try to shake him, they fail, because the path is stronger than the storm. You must understand, committing to one path is not about limiting yourself. It is about aligning yourself so precisely that your potential finally has a direction strong enough to shape destiny. Most men dabble, few commit, almost none become inevitable. 2026 demands inevitability from you. Choose one path, one mission, one great transformation, and bend your life around it. Let it consume your attention, dictate your habits, sculpt your days, and forge your identity. When a man finally walks a single path with total commitment, the world moves out of his way, not because he is lucky or special, but because nature itself respects direction. And that is how you become untouchable. Rule number 13, the calm inside chaos. Every man wants control. Few understand where control actually comes from. It doesn't come from dominance. It doesn't come from strength. It doesn't come from intelligence. It comes from calmness, the rarest form of power in a world addicted to noise. Chaos destroys the average man. It exposes his impatience, triggers his emotions, and reveals the instability he tries to hide. But the untouchable man walks through chaos with a stillness that feels unnatural to everyone around him. His calm is not passive. It is a weapon. It is the kind of composure that makes people adjust their tone around him, the kind that disrupts aggression without confrontation, the kind that turns unpredictable situations into controlled ones, simply by refusing to match the chaos of others. This rule is not about being peaceful. It's about becoming unshakable in environments where other men collapse. Chaos is the great revealer. Men love to think they are solid, disciplined, focused, grounded, until life increases pressure. Then you see their hands shake, their decisions deteriorate, their emotions spiral, their words become weapons used against themselves. Chaos extracts the truth. It shows who has a center and who only pretends to. But the untouchable man is different. He does not rely on the environment being stable. He builds himself to be stable, regardless of the environment. Disaster, conflict, uncertainty, none of it pulls him off balance. He stands like a pillar while others crumble. Calmness creates control. People think chaos empowers the loudest man. It doesn't. It empowers the calmest one. Because calmness gives you better perception. You see what others miss. Better decisions. You choose logic over impulse. Better influence. People trust steadiness over volatility. Better timing. You act when others are blinded by panic. The man who stays calm gains an immediate advantage in every scenario. Arguments, crises, negotiations, social dynamics, leadership. People naturally follow the steady hand, not because he demands it, but because survival instincts recognize stability as safety. Emotional stillness makes you untouchable. Chaos isn't just external. The worst chaos is internal. Anxiety, overthinking, fear, anger, doubt. When these emotions erupt, most men lose themselves. The untouchable man silences the storm inside before he faces the storm outside. Internal stillness is the highest form of preparation. When your mind is quiet, you can read people. When your emotions are controlled, you can predict outcomes. When your thoughts are still, your intuition sharpens. When your center is calm, your presence intimidates. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is latent force. The lion resting in the tall grass is calm, but he is not harmless. Calm is a practice, not a personality trait. You do not need to be born a calm person. You build it, one decision at a time. You build it every time you choose silence over reaction, every time you wait instead of rush, every time you observe instead of explode, every time you breathe before responding, every time you detach before deciding. These small choices accumulate into a permanent state. Calmness becomes your default, your instinct, your identity. And when the world attempts to shake you, it fails. Mastering chaos is the ultimate flex. Most men brag about strength, but the strongest man rarely needs to show it. His calmness speaks louder than his aggression. His silence feels heavier than shouting. His composure radiates authority without effort. He becomes the center of the room, a gravitational force, a point of stability that others subconsciously orbit around. This is the calm inside chaos. It is not a gentle trait. It is a terrifying one, because nothing is harder to break than a man who refuses to be moved. Rule number 14, shadow resilience. Every man has two versions of himself, the one he shows the world and the one he must face alone. Most men hide from their shadow, the darker parts of themselves, the fears they avoid, the impulses they suppress, the weaknesses they pretend not to have. They build their identity on denial instead of understanding. But real resilience, the kind that makes a man untouchable, does not come from avoiding the shadow. It comes from walking into it. Shadow resilience is the ability to confront your darkest elements without being devoured by them. It is the strength to look at the parts of yourself that you don't like, don't control, don't understand, and use them as fuel instead of letting them rule you. This rule exists because every man carries wounds, insecurities, temptations, fears, and a past that tries to pull him backward. The average man spends years trying to run from this. The untouchable man learns to integrate it. The shadow becomes a weapon, not a prison. Your shadow holds the strength you haven't claimed yet. People think their shadow is where their defects live. They're wrong. Your shadow is where your potential lives, untamed, unrefined, unclaimed. Anger becomes power when disciplined. Fear becomes wisdom when understood. Shame becomes resilience when confronted. Pain becomes clarity when processed. Darkness becomes fuel when directed. Your shadow is not the enemy. Your ignorance of it is. The untouchable man realizes that the parts of himself he tries to bury are the same parts that could make him strong, decisive, dangerous, unstoppable. If only he faced them head on. Avoiding your shadow makes you weak. Men who avoid their shadow become reactive instead of intentional, defensive instead of confident, fragile instead of adaptable, predictable instead of strategic, dependent instead of self-sufficient. When you run from the darker parts of yourself, they control you from the background. Your wounds dictate your choices. Your insecurities shape your relationships. Your fears limit your potential. Weakness thrives in darkness, not because darkness is harmful, but because unexamined darkness becomes chaos. The shadow you refuse to face becomes the enemy you cannot defeat. Facing darkness makes you anti-fragile. To become untouchable, you must become anti-fragile, a man who grows stronger under pressure instead of breaking. Shadow resilience is the foundation of that. When you face the parts of yourself that frighten or embarrass you, three things happen. They lose their power over you. What once controlled you becomes something you can control. You gain clarity about who you really are, not who you pretend to be, not who others expect you to be, but who you are at your core. You develop resistance to manipulation. No one can weaponize what you already understand and accept. The man who knows his darkness becomes immune to shame, criticism, intimidation, emotional attacks. He cannot be destabilized because he already walked through his own hell. He has seen the worst inside himself. So nothing outside himself feels truly threatening. The shadow is a teacher, not a threat. Your shadow is not here to destroy you. It's here to expose what you must refine. When you feel envy, your shadow is telling you what you truly desire. When you feel fear, your shadow is pointing to where you must grow. When you feel anger, your shadow is revealing where your boundaries have been violated. When you feel shame, your shadow is showing you where you're not aligned with your own values. Each dark emotion is a message. Each flaw is a lesson. Each weakness is an invitation to evolve. The man who listens becomes powerful. The man who ignores becomes lost. Integrating the shadow creates inner dominance. Shadow resilience is not about fixing yourself. It's about claiming yourself. The good, the bad, the broken, the brilliant, all of it becomes part of one coherent identity. You stop living in pieces. You stop fighting against yourself. You stop pretending. And you start moving with a deep, grounded certainty. This creates a presence that others can feel. A man who has nothing to hide, nothing to fear, and nothing to prove. A man like that is extremely rare. A man like that is extremely dangerous. A man like that is untouchable. Rule number 15, the last threshold. There is always one final barrier between who you are and who you are meant to become. Men think it is fear. Men think it is doubt. Men think it is discipline, opportunity, circumstance. They're wrong. The last threshold is identity. Not the identity you show the world, but the identity you secretly believe you deserve. Every man has an inner ceiling, a quiet, invisible limit on how powerful, disciplined, confident, influential, extraordinary he allows himself to become. It's the final cage, the final enemy, the last resistance. This rule exists to break that ceiling. Because 2026 is not about small improvement. It's about becoming untouchable, a man whose identity and reality no longer clash, but align so perfectly that evolution becomes natural and inevitable. To cross the last threshold, you must confront the truth. You cannot live above the identity you hold for yourself. You cannot outperform the man you believe you are. You cannot expand while clinging to a smaller version of yourself. Everything you did this year, the silence, the detachment, the discipline, the resilience, was preparation for this moment. A brutal, honest confrontation. Do you still see yourself as the man you were, or the man you are becoming? Your old identity will fight back. When you start rising, your old identity does not vanish quietly. It resists, it doubts, it whispers, "You're not that guy. You've never done this before. Who do you think you are?" This resistance is not failure. It is confirmation. It means you're crossing into territory your old self cannot survive. Every habit you break, every fear you confront, every boundary you enforce, all of it kills the weaker identity piece by piece. The old identity wants comfort. The new identity demands evolution. One must die for the other to live. And this is where most men quit. Not because they are incapable, but because becoming a new version of yourself feels like betrayal to the old one. But you are not here for comfort. You are here for transformation. The new identity requires a new standard. If you want to step into a higher version of yourself, you must hold yourself to standards that your old self would have never tolerated. Higher discipline, higher intent, higher behavior, higher patience, higher presence, higher expectations for the world around you. A man becomes untouchable not because the world respects him, but because he respects himself at a level most men cannot even comprehend. When your internal standard rises, your external life rearranges itself to match. That is identity alchemy. That is evolution. That is the last threshold. Becoming untouchable is an identity shift, not an act. You cannot pretend to be untouchable. You must become it. A man who is untouchable, moves slowly, speaks minimally, thinks deeply, is controlled yet dangerous, is calm yet intense, is detached yet purposeful, is silent yet impossible to ignore, is unbreakable because he already broke the version of himself that was weak. This is not performance. This is embodiment, identity, truth. When you fully accept the identity of the man you are crafting, the world responds differently. People treat you differently. Opportunities appear differently. You walk through life with the weight of someone who has no illusions left. You have crossed the threshold. 2026 is the year you become untouchable. Not because the world changes, not because circumstances improve, not because someone saves you, but because you finally chose to abandon the version of yourself that was holding you back. Because you finally decided to burn the past identity, the fragile one, the fearful one, the hesitant one. And from those ashes, something unrecognizable rises. A man who does not flinch, a man who does not break, a man who does not apologize for existing at full power, a man who has mastered silence, discipline, presence, focus, resilience, stillness, identity. A man no longer shaped by the world, but shaping it. That is the final threshold. That is the transformation. That is the ascent. And once you cross it, you do not go back. Not in 2026, not ever, because the man you become cannot be touched.